And we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Conversations on Purpose number 3. Yeah, I am. I'm so pleased to have my first international guest from the UK, Paul Barker. Welcome, Paul. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you.
Absolutely. Paul has a fascinating story. I actually don't want to give too much away, so hang on and we'll just chat with Paul. Paul has worked for the Royal Navy. He's traveled the Amazon, the Andes. I know from our conversation, Paul, you've lived in South Africa, so lived a really full life. And you're still young, you're still in it. There's so much more to do and to go. So Paul,
absolutely.
I'm so curious. How was that? How did you end up from working in the Royal Navy to all the traveling that you've done?
Well, firstly, a huge thank you for inviting me on, and it's a real pleasure to be here. I've been looking forward to this for the last few days. So how did I get into the Royal Navy, first of all? And that was actually going back to the 1970s. My father actually became very ill, and my parents couldn't afford to have me at home. Basically, they couldn't afford to give me an education, etc., etc. So age 16, I left home, joined the Royal Navy, very young, very naive, very raw, and thinking that, yes, get in the Navy, travel the world, because when I joined the services, there hadn't been any conflicts for many years. In actual fact, there hadn't been any proper conflicts since about the mid-60s, and this was 1979. And of course, that was fairly short-lived, because 3 years later there was the Falklands crisis, and I was on HMS Exeter. So we kind of just kicked in at the very end when we were one of the replacement ships, so that was kind of the beginning of a journey of travel. Because we were very fortunate on the way back from the Falklands. We were able to go to places like Antigua, Barbados, places like that. So yeah, lots of travels all over Europe through being in the services. Why did I go in the services? Originally, I wanted to be a sea surveyor. I wanted to survey the ocean and what have you, but unfortunately, I'm a touch too colorblind for that, and I ended up following my grandfather's footsteps and actually being a pen pusher and working in the kind of admiral's office and captain's office, that sort of thing. And then got married, decided that it wasn't for me for the long term. So after 9 years or so, kind of came out. And then, a few years later, something happens in your life sometimes, and it's like you don't see it coming really. And ended up separating and getting divorced. And I was at this stage age 40, so kind of in your midlife. That's your kind of the old midlife crisis that people talk about. And it was certainly one that spun me downwards rather than upwards at the time. I went into quite a dark and deep dark space. Certainly drank more than I care to admit at the time. It was really, just as a coping mechanism. But out of that, I remembered having a piece of paper in my bedside drawer, and I got this piece of paper out, and it was actually a mind, body, spirit course, which I then enrolled on, and that was the beginning. And that was an 18-month course. Actually in hands-on healing. And from there, I then went to Spain a couple of years later to see a friend, and I was staying there and I had a couple of days left. And I was laying in bed one night reading a magazine, and I suddenly saw this advert for Machu Picchu in Peru. And no word of a lie, every hair on my head, my body just went up when I saw this advert. And it was like, I just knew that I had to go. And it was like, I didn't know how I was going to find the money to go, et cetera. There I was, recently just divorced. I was looking after 2 children because I had the children, so that's a whole nother chapter and of my life. And long story short, I ended up traveling to Peru, lost all my luggage on the way for more than a week. So I arrived in Peru with nothing. So yeah, a real kind of deep, dark night of the soul journey, really, into that whole realm of mind, body, spirit, but also, who am I as a person?
Right.
Who was I? You know, that was the thing. As much as I was exploring, I was also beginning to uncover through that journey who I really was. Or perhaps not necessarily who I was, but a part of me that had been buried and missing for a long time. So I came back, spent a bit of the time in the Amazon, as you mentioned, in the high Andes, with the kind of shamans of the upper Andes, which are very different from the shamans in the Amazon, very, very different ways of working. I then came back and to the UK, and I was like, you know, where can I find out more? You know, I need to do more. And I ended up studying a kind of a year's shamanic practices with a guy who had trained as a kind of shamanic beekeeper. And it was the most interesting journey. We studied shamanic practices from all around the world. In other words, you find the same in all the different locations, you know, different continents, whether you were talking Aboriginal, whether you're talking about Siberia, North America, South America, Africa. And then from there, then a few years later, I met my current wife, who was a South African lady. And we went to South Africa, not because she just had a feeling that she needed to go. It was like either we were going to be together and go together, or we couldn't be together. So it was a very, you know, kind of challenging, there we are, newly into a relationship, just about to get married, all of these dynamics playing out. So we went and we spent 15 years in South Africa. And in that time, my wife became what is called an African Sangoma, which is a shaman. And so we got married in 2005. We went into Africa in 2006. And then really, I didn't see much of her in 2007, 8 and 9. She was away. She went away. And in traditional shamanic trainings and things, it's not a weekend course. It's not a once a weekend or twice a weekend for a year. This is immersion into the deepest levels of that work. So,
I always chuckle when people tell me, "Oh, I'm getting an education in shamanism." Like, there's not such a thing as getting an educated or taking a quick weekend course, like you were saying. It's something that you deeply called for, first of all. From what I know about shamanism, if you do not follow the call, you get very ill, or it's sparked by something like a life crisis or an illness.
Absolutely. I mean, when my wife knew that she had to go to South Africa. Every time she saw an advert on the TV and it happened to be taken in Cape Town or some other part, she was, you know, crying and crying and crying. And this is before we went. So when we got there, but what really happened when we got there, she became really, really ill. So like you're saying, this calling actually manifests in some sort of crisis or another. And she became very ill and was quite mentally unstable, actually, for a while. But, you know, this is the effect on it. And actually, if you don't take up the calling, it can, you know, you'll end up either dead or in some other institution or something. It's very severe. So, but the gift of all of this is that, you know, she went into her training. I was left on my own for a long time, which in a way was my own training. That was my own kind of initiation or part of it. And yeah, we just then experienced some of the richest things that one can experience in African cosmology. The rich ceremony, blessings, and you know, all sorts of things around that. And all the time I'm changing. and I can feel myself changing. I can feel myself, shifting, and this deepening. And I'm after I came out of the Navy, I was in IT, and I have been, and I'm still in IT a little bit, but I've been in IT for many years, particularly e-commerce, and I was just getting more and more resistant towards the work, towards that way of being, and another way was beginning to develop within myself. I then began to do a lot of self-inquiry around, and particularly as a man, and studied men and men's work. And we have this terrible crisis of men and men's work.
I'm so happy you're bringing that up. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, well, it really is a passion of mine, because I run a bi-weekly men's group with a great bunch of guys. They really are. They're absolutely amazing, and I'm very fortunate, to be able to do that. But we have this crisis of men, in terms of suicide rates. The prisons are full up with so many men as compared to women, and it's a very, very challenging place, actually, for a man to be in this world right now. And a lot of men are still gone.
Yeah, can you talk to some of the challenges? And I'm going to bring something in here that my current teacher and mentor said. She said that it's easy, and it comes natural for women to have domain in the spiritual realm, and it comes easier to men to have dominion of the physical realm. And in a balanced relationship, the woman sort of becomes, because she has this channel, becomes the oracle of the man. How does that fit into your experience?
I certainly think it does. And the reason I say that is, this is not casting a large tarred brush against all men in any way, shape or form, but a lot of men find it very difficult to touch base with their emotions. Let's be honest. It's a big problem. The younger men of today are doing better. Men of my age, certainly it took a lot longer to really kind of find and really understand, what does that mean to be connected, to actually sit there in a meditation or whatever, and actually feel what is fear, what is sadness, what is grief, etc. To actually and really feel those, and what is gratitude. Gratitude's that's a beautiful emotion. So men find it very, very difficult to connect to those emotions, and therefore they don't trust the emotion. And because they don't trust their emotion, they don't trust their feelings. They can't connect. So whereas a woman, she knows her emotions. Most women really know their emotions, and that's why they have that, like you say, they have that connection. And it's really interesting, because one of my biggest challenges was, and for a long time, was I didn't own my own power because I relied on my partner or my wife. And that was exacerbated because I then was married to a Sangoma, who was a very powerful, strong woman. But that has made me a stronger person within my own right. So that's and just trying to help men in this day. Men are still programmed to wear the trousers. Men are still programmed to go out and fight and be the breadwinners, and it's in the DNA. So men are struck. That's why a lot of men struggle. For a lot of men, it's shameful for them to be at home or not to be earning as much or whatever. So we have this masculine feminine balance going on, and that's a dance. That's a real dance, because you've got the men who are trying to find their way in life, and you've got the women who have become much stronger, but then you've got those women that can, in their building up their strength, again, can go either of two ways. They can go much more into the feminine, or they can go into the masculine within themselves. And so, particularly in the workplace, a lot of women are very much in their masculine, just as an energy, not as a woman, of course, but they have energy within the workplace. Why do they need that? They wouldn't survive otherwise, particularly at a managerial level. So there's an incredible dance that's kind of constantly going on at the moment between the masculine and the feminine. And, even my wife and I find that sometimes on a daily basis, just as a husband and a wife. We see the dance between us and what's going on, when particularly if one of you's feeling stronger and the other one maybe not feeling so kind of connected on a day, you can get that dance. But yeah, so that's a really beautiful thing. And that's actually a part of the work that we do. My wife and I do work together, but that's another thing where we work with people on balancing the masculine and the feminine.
I feel a whole other conversation between you and I coming on at a future point. There's so much good information here. And yes, and it's also balancing those parts within yourself, acknowledging that you have those masculine and feminine parts in yourself, and to bring them into union within yourself. And then as men and women coming together and appreciating our differences and appreciating what we each bring to the table, versus because they have, like you said, there has been that development that women felt like in order to succeed and be seen and heard in the workplace, they had to act like men. However, it's fortunately that also is shifting, where women can bring their unique approach to the workplace and to life in general and be successful without feeling like they have to deny what is intrinsically theirs and their very feminine gifts. So there's a lot of awesomeness happening right now. A lot of fantastic new developments. And I'd love to have a conversation with you just around that.
Absolutely, we can. Yeah, I'd love it.
Maybe even your wife will join.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem. That'd be fantastic. Yeah.
Yes, that would be so interesting. So anybody who's listening, this is going to come in the future. We're going to have a really interesting conversation.
Yeah.
So how, and I also wanted to say kudos to you for being strong and powerful enough to, when your wife said, hey, I have to do this thing and I'm going to go into the desert or wherever she was going for 3 years, for you to not make stories out of this and give it a meaning. You might have gone through phases. I don't know what your process was, but at the end, you were telling me you're still together. So
absolutely. And
awesome.
I did go through stories, and that's why I kind of intimated that it was my own initiation in some ways. But I wouldn't change things if I'm truthful now. Yes, it was hard, and at one point in our lives, we moved so often. It was like, we just want to put our roots, we want to put our roots down somewhere. But after all of that, just to kind of bring this a little bit more up to date, it was like when I started investigating men's work, and I came across the works of Joseph Campbell, Michael Mead, people like Michael Mead, who were real initiates of men's work going back to the 1970s, particularly early 70s as well. And that kind of triggered a whole thing, which led me into to a coaching training. And then so I kind of got into the men's work through doing a online program with a gentleman in Norway called Ivan Skellum, called Reclaim Your Inner Throne, which was an absolutely incredible 3-month, deep immersion into reclaiming your throne. Getting as a guy, becoming that sovereign, the sovereign being, not the, like the everything that comes with that. I mean, you just have to look at Aragorn in Lord of the Rings, that final ceremony, and he's talking about everybody else. He's not talking about himself, and that's the leadership and sovereignty that we're looking at. And then I kind of did a coaching modality which worked around the archetypes of the king, the warrior, the lover, the magician, called the Four Gateways. And then moving on from that, about 5 years ago, I came across a modality which, having done quite a lot of things, before that, I came across this modality. It was called life alignment, and I had such big shifts happen in myself that I was like, okay, I think I need to study this. So my wife and I talked about it, and we said, okay, well, let's go on and let's do the foundation module to see how it goes. And well, I started that, and I was basically, I was in hook, line, and sinker, because it's a really interesting process, but it works on clearing our emotional blockages. That's what we're really talking about here. So energetic and emotional blockages, if you clear them, you can allow yourself to be much more aligned with who you really are, aligned with you, aligned with your purpose, aligned with your family, aligned with your business. And so, yeah, there's a whole lot around that, but it was really around my own experiences and what I experienced from it. So coming to the topic that we're here, purpose, and how that links all that together, was I really feel that all the way through my life, everything that I've done has prepared me for the next stage. And I've had an awareness of that ever since I was in my young teens, 12, 13. I've had an awareness of that all the way through. And that doesn't mean to say that I've always felt on purpose. Doesn't mean to say I've always felt that I've been doing what my purpose is until, the last few years. And now I've kind of found that. And I think one of the things I was thinking about before we got together was, there's a big message in the world that we're in today. There's so much pressure on people to find their purpose. I'm all for people for finding their purpose, because I think in a world that lacks clarity and direction for a lot of people, we need guidance. And I think that's another thing. People think in today, and I did for a long time, that's why I'm saying it, that I could do it all on my own. And that's a very man thing. I don't need help. I don't need support. I can go and do it my own. And that's not it at all. I needed support. And when I got the support, I then realized how powerful that was and how it strengthened me up. And as a result, we can talk purpose for hours. It's such an interesting one. But that's what all of those things that happened to me enabled me to do what I do today. Because they gave me experience, they gave me a sense of vision of how actually things are. And a lot of what I've gone through, in truth, has not always been easy. At times, it's been an extraordinarily rough ride. And, my wife and I lost everything twice, not once. We lost everything twice. Yeah. So
I can relate.
And on one of those occasions, a friend said, come and live with me. So we packed up our car. We went from Cape Town to Johannesburg. That's 1,000 miles away. We did the journey in an old car. We managed to get there. And she said, come and live with us for 6 months and we can help, you can get settled and reorganized. And then 2 weeks after we got there, she got made redundant. And there was a whole nother story that went after that. But it was all okay. It was all okay. Why? Because we were meant to be there. And that's...
Let me ask you, now that you, for yourself, sort of see the bigger picture coming together, and you have, and I can absolutely relate to that. And I think that is why you and I ended up connecting through the workshop that we were both on, because I see a lot of, and I hear a lot of similarities. So what would you tell people now looking back that are still in those dips? Or what would you tell yourself still being in that place now, being more on the other side of it?
Well, first of all, if I go back 20 years, I didn't have a belief or spiritual foundation that I have now, belief system. And I think having a belief system, whatever that is, and whatever that is for everybody, doesn't. I'm not an advocate of it has to be one way. It's whatever is right for you. But to have something which you believe in is absolutely key. You know, because without that, there's no foundation or structure. At the same time, of course, the paradox of that is that when you're in the hero's journey and you're Gandalf, who's gone down, you know, with the Balrog, you know, it's not an easy place to be. But I'm here today. You're here as well. We've both been through many things in our lives, and I'm sure, like I said, we could talk for hours and hours. And you have to have belief that the situation you're in now will change. You have to believe that. You must believe that the universe has some sort of plan for you. Because I do, you know, and that's, you know, whatever my fears have been at different times in my life, somehow, it's always worked out. It's always worked out.
Yes. That's great advice. Yes, you have to anchor yourself into something that's greater than you. That's something that has pulled me through many of those times, for sure.
Yeah.
And then get help. Then reach out to, for example, somebody like you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's very important that, yes, I mean, people are always welcome to reach out. And, you know, the way I work is I always invite people for an initial chat. It's not about getting straight into work. It's, you know, we have a conversation. We have a conversation to see if we're both on the same page. Do we fit? But I think the most important thing is to try and be involved in some sort of community, some sort of, however small. So just taking men as an example, if men can become a part of a small men's group, even if it's only 5 or 6 people, that gives them a sense of belonging. It gives them a place where they can share in safety. They know that it's confidential. They can drop their guard, and they can really share their fears and whatever's going on for them. And that, of course, applies to women as well. I do think, you know, women tend to be better at opening up to how they're feeling and what have you, but I think it's still the same. I think to be involved with a group that you can get support from, that's what also helps you through.
For sure. Absolutely agree. Yes. So for those that feel called to reach out to you and have that conversation, where can they find you?
They can find my website. It's paul-barker.com. And there's links on most of the pages just to book a chat. I focus on 3 main areas of my work, which is personal alignment, that's one-on-one, home alignment, where we look at people's homes and what's going on there, and business alignment. So, but any of those will, you know, book a 30-minute call, and it's just a case of seeing, how does it fit? And it's always good to meet people. It's always good to chat and see, you know, I really feel that, you know, and my wife is the same, you know, we're in service in our lives now. This is our work. We're in service to help people. And it's as simple as that. And to help people, you know, become more in alignment with their true purpose. So if it's on a business level, is the business running in alignment with its vision and its mission? And in most cases, there are things that are not quite always in alignment. But on a one-on-one, it's really about helping people to unblock those emotional and energetic blockages that they're holding on to from past experiences, past traumas, that from that they can be freer, they can then begin to see with more clarity, and they can really then begin to feel they have direction and purpose within their lives.
Beautiful. Paul, I so enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for making time and connecting with me today. I know 100% this is to be continued, just remembering our very first conversation and in how many directions we can go. So to anybody that was listening in, thank you. And check in next time, Paul. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to the next one.
Yes, me too.